Hey boys, how's your week going? I know our country seems really divided right now, but I have a theory about that. I call it culture wars and the 4Ds theory. Let me get into it. So culture wars and the 4Ds theory explains how we became so divided. This is just my theory, many others would disagree, but I wanted to share this with you. In order for people to be divided, it requires certain things, and I want to go over those things now. This is where the 4Ds come in, okay? D number 1, keep people desperate. I want to share some stats from the Bureau of Labor and Statistics to explain this. In 2019, the average salary for somebody without a college degree was $39,000 a year. The average salary for somebody without a college degree, ages 20 to 24, was just under $31,000 a year. Side note, the top 10% of earners earn $118,000 a year. Also, the top 10% of earners own 92% of the stock market. So when someone comes up to you and tells you how good the stock market is doing, unless you earn this much, that has nothing to do with you. So I wouldn't use that as a metric. But the stat that I want to get back to is that non-college educated people aged 20 to 24 earn on average a little less than $31,000 a year. And you may be thinking, $31,000 a year, that's not so bad. I mean, old son, you're an E2 in the Army. I know what you make. So $31,000 a year might sound pretty sweet, but you see, there's a catch, and this is what I want to get into. To demonstrate this, I'm going to tell you a quick story. In 1999, I got out of the Marine Corps and I moved here. In the year 2000, old son, you were born. In 2001, your mom and I separated and I bought a townhome. It wasn't a fancy place. It was just a townhome, 1,300 square feet, 2-bedroom, 2-bath, 30 miles west of the city. Nothing luxurious at all. At the time, I had been in my job for 2 years. I started out making $15.40 an hour, and at the time of buying that townhome, I made $16.80 an hour. I bought that townhome for $75,000 using my VA benefits through my VA loan. That's a perfectly normal middle-class story right there. Except something changed. That same townhome that just 19 years ago was worth $75,000 is now worth over $215,000. The starting wage for that same job that I started at is $16.80. Meaning that that same job in 21 years only had a 7% increase in starting pay, but that same townhome had a 187% increase in cost. So you might be thinking, how is somebody like me ever able to afford a home? That's the question, and that's the problem. Almost half the country makes $40,000 or less per year. Meanwhile, the cost of living has gone up exponentially. This keeps people desperate. It keeps them thinking in the immediate rather than the long term. And what this also does is it makes solutions that require long-term planning inconceivable to many people. So when a group of scientists come out with a 300-page report that says if we don't change our environmental behavior within the next 10 years, there's going to be global destruction. If you're one of those desperate people, you're thinking 10 years, I'm worried about the next 10 days. Or if someone comes out and says we can have universal health care, but to do it properly, it will require a 15-year approach before it's completed, you're thinking 15 years, I'm declaring bankruptcy right now because of my cancer treatments. Simply put, when you're drowning, you do not have the time to wait for someone to build you a boat. By keeping people desperate, you keep them thinking in the immediate, which brings us to the second D. The second D is keep them dumb, and this is accomplished by making sure that people are consuming a steady diet of cable news opinion hosts, Facebook shared articles, and other stuff like that. Because cable news and many other media outlets make their money on clicks and views, it is in their best interest to put things out that are inflammatory, that make you want to share them or click them or debate on them. Rather than talking about real issues, policies, and solutions, it's much more exciting and much more lucrative to talk about things that divide us. Which brings us to our third D, keep people distracted. And this is where the culture wars come in. On the surface, culture wars are much easier to understand for people. They're much more easier to take a side on. They require much less nuance, critical thinking, and deep research as actual policy issues. This is why they're so popular. They're also popular because media continues to push them because it results in clicks and views, which results in more profit for them. I mean, if you're a media company, What do you think is going to get more clicks and views? An in-depth longitudinal study on how wages haven't risen in the last 40 years? Or the latest coverage of a bean manufacturer getting boycotted because their CEO is a supporter of Trump? Culture wars are immediate. It's something that people can form an immediate opinion on with the limited information they are given. It's something that they can fight about on social media, fight about with family and friends, and make it look like they're politically engaged, when in fact, none of these things actually matter. And that's what leads us to our fourth and final D, divided. This is what divides people. In reality, we're not that divided. Half the country is in that same boat of making too little money to afford a home. That's not divisive, that's unifying. When in reality, all we are is desperate, dumb, distracted, and then divided. But we don't have to be that way. So what do? How do you counter this? Well, this is my theory. You counter it by when someone comes to you with a culture war issue, you come to them with a serious issue. So when someone says, liberals have a war on Christmas, you counter with, did you know that in 2019 the 25 richest Americans gained $1.5 trillion in wealth? Or when someone comes to you and says, mask mandates are infringing on my freedoms, you reply with, did you know that 40% of workers earning $40,000 a year or less lost their job during this pandemic? And in June, 32% of people could not make their rent or mortgage payments, leading many experts to feel like there's a huge homelessness crisis coming up in the very near future. And when they answer, what does that have to do with what I'm talking about? You can answer with, nothing. I just feel like it's more important. Anyway, boys, that's my theory. You guys got to come up with your own. And as always, I love you, I'm proud of you, and I think you're wonderful. We'll see you next week.